Oh, here we go.
Hi. And action!
Hi, I'm back again, back out in the courtyard at James Ingwersen, the Ingwersen property. Right behind me is the center of that wagon wheel, as we talked about. This is the water source, and everything is built around this water source. Back in Pomerania, an entire community was built around a water source. When they came to Door County, they still kept that wagon wheel philosophy. The building over here to the north, this is the southern building. Here's the western is the house, and the eastern is on my back side. And this is called a courtyard. Extremely important to the Pomeranian history when people came to Door County. So let's start by talking a little bit about chinking, otherwise known as dogging. So as I walk backwards behind me, this was considered the small animal barn. And in fact, in front of Dave's lap, I've got the original deed to the property, which dates back to the 1860s. And it's super, super, super cool. And we've got, Jim and I had the honor of going to the courthouse and doing lots of research. So, really interesting stuff. So, behind me is what's called the small animal building. When they bought this property, it was in the fall of the 1860s, and people were in a hurry to try to get the buildings built. So this is the small animal building. They built it fast, they built it kind of crude, but it was really important that they start this barn for the animals as well as the house. So let's talk about chinking. Let's talk about this building. So this is a small animal barn. This is also known as the wind tunnel. This is an extremely important part of this farm. Why? When people came to this area, it wasn't Wisconsin yet, but when they came for freedom, they came for religion, they came for new opportunity. And when they came with just the clothes on their back and a little bit of money, they thought they were going to have the greatest of farmland and the greatest of opportunity, and it was filled with trees. Trees were everywhere. So first they had to start by cutting down the trees, trying to beat the cold, trying to make their buildings. So they quickly put up buildings like this building that I have in front of me. Back in the day, they really did not have nails. So you'll see in the inside, and maybe we'll get to it. You can see that the trusses in this building are put together with a single peg. They whittled a hole, and then they notched a little wooden shingle in. So can you follow me just for a second? Let's just see if we can capture that move. This was the first barn that was built on the property. So if you focus in up on the corner rafters, and I'm not sure if we're going to get a good view or not, but you can see where the trusses go together. And on the left-hand side, there's a little peg that sticks out, and that's the actual wooden notch that they had whittled through to actually put these trusses together. So let's step back out here with a little bit of light so you folks can see a little bit better. So these people were brilliant. They knew that you could not build a log structure with log on top of log. Log changes with the weather. It expands and contracts. They knew they had to have something in the middle, and that's called chinking, otherwise known as daubing. So what they did was, obviously there's lots of limestone. That was a great thing for them. They would dig a big 5-by-foot hole, 4 or 5 feet deep. They would get limestone, grind it down with a big grinding with horses. They'd bring it back to the farm. In this big hole, they would dump this lime that was all powder, add sand, add water, stir it up because that limestone creates a chemical reaction. They'd cover it with straw for about 2 or 3 days till it was heated up a little bit, and that's how they use that mixture then as chinking. This is actual 1880s chinking, 1860s chinking, and it was used. So if you look on my left, you'll see that chinking, and if you look on your right, you're going to see a very unique kind of product, and this is what we call stovewood. Stovewood was used for a couple of different things. It was used for warmth. And the wood that they typically used was a 10 or a 12-inch piece of either pine or cedar. Why? It was easier to work with. So when all the men in the neighborhood would get together, they'd put up this big barn, whether it was a house or a barn. This stove wood was used because the Pa could make a batch of chinking, and he could have his wife and the kids all help with the stove wood. It was easy to handle. It was not heavy at all. So in Jim's home, Jim and Phyllis's home, you're going to see, I've got a picture of the upstairs, and the entire upstairs is all chinked. So back in the day, the men from the neighborhood helped build that house, and then inside the upstairs and downstairs, you'll see this gorgeous chinking everywhere. So Pa and Ma and the kids were busy working, creating that house into a home for all of them. So that's chinking and that's stove wood. So earlier today, Mr. Ingwersen talked about a fire of 1980 after a big barn dance. So I want to show you what happened. So the little log cabin that sits there used to be a big hay barn. And that hay barn burned to the ground. And that is the building or the structure that Mr. Ingwersen acquired from Liberty Grove. The barn that we're going to walk in over here, we call that the gallery barn. That used to be the cow barn. And there were 6 stanchions that Mr. Ingwersen had taken out and used that as his gallery and as his sketch classes. That burned to the ground. The stone is obviously left, but when he rebuilt, it's really a pole building down there. But Jim, Mr. Ingwersen and Phyllis knew the importance of keeping this 1860s piece of property. So that was his gallery. So what he did was he took this granary that's right here, and he added on this end section. You'll see the original 1860s chinking where the begonias are. That whole building is definitely from the 1860s, and Jim added this on. I want you to turn right back around and show you this wind tunnel. So this is a very unique thing to Pomeranians. What is a wind tunnel? So when the people came here back in the 1860s, there was trees everywhere. That was the very first product that they used. It was making a shingle. The shingles you see on that barn, the shingles on Jim's house, they had shingles. And they used those shingles to make money. They shipped them to various ports, and then they were shipped down to Milwaukee and Chicago to build the cities. That was product number 1. Product number 2 was grain. And that's why they have this what's called a vortex. Normally there are doors on each end. The grain was uses it for his car if you've ever driven by. But this creates what's called a vortex. So the grain was extremely important because a farm was defined by how many horses you had. And you needed a horse to do anything and everything. They were the most prized thing on a farm. So this is called a vortex. And in most seasons, the horses would come, they would come through here, they'd stand here, you would throw the hay up in the mow, and I believe you can go through either side, and you'll see how this is all open. Mr. Ingwersen put this here to protect his car, but this really is all open, and it's open to bullock hay mows. They would throw the hay up, or the wheat up. Wheat was the first product. But this wind tunnel allowed them to take the grain off the stalk, so when they would open the doors up in the fall of the year and the winter, they would open these doors up, and it creates a wind tunnel, a breeze. They would beat that stalk, the grain would fall to the ground, the chaff would blow away, and that's how they collected and kept their grain. Very, very important. So this property was shingles, grain, and then finally the last one was that 6-stall cow barn. So let's walk this real quick. I'm going to see if you can maybe possibly see in here. And I think you can, maybe. If you stand back right up there, you'll see where there's a big opening. Is it possible to see? Does somebody have a light, Steph? Okay. So there's a big opening behind us where the hay would be thrown in and the chaff. And maybe, just maybe, can we see it a little bit closer? There's a hole where can you see anything?
Yep.
You can see that hole, and that's where the horses would come in. The hay would be thrown in, or the straw would be thrown in. Through these, and each side is equal. There's a hole like this on the other side. You could also tell by the logs that the bark is on it. When they were building this structure, they were trying to beat the weather. And so the entire inside of this barn and outside, they never took the bark off. They built this structure with the bark on because of time. So this is the small animal barn. We're really quickly going to sneak over to the gallery barn. And we call that's really the cow barn. So come on this way and let's take a little walk. So in front of you is the gallery barn. This was built with all stone from this property. And again, the chinking dates back to the 1860s. Inside, Mr. Ingwersen has designed a new gallery. So come on in, let's take a look. Let's go to the other door, actually. Whoops. Let's go this way. Oh. So this is the new gallery barn. This has been Jim's project all summer. He dreamed of having another gallery, had some different ideas, but we decided that this is what it's going to be. So if you take a look around, this was his studio. This is the barn that they had the barn dance in. And like I said, this is one of the structures that did burn to the ground. There are a few remnants of the fire that are left around. But right now we're using this as a beautiful gallery. So this is part of a motor that was melted so you can know how hot that fire truly was. So if you can just glance around and see all the beautiful art, all the portraits, all the landscape, he was truly an amazing, amazing man. I'm going to take you to the main, what we call the granary, which is James Ingwersen's studio. So let's go a little further. Everything evolves around the courtyard. In fact, I'm going to stop and do a little sneak preview of Mr. Ingwersen's actual workshop. You're getting some special treatment today. So this is Mr. Ingwersen's workshop. And he did a lot of work down here. So this is Mr. Ingwersen's workshop. We come down here, we do lots of framing down here. In fact, we've got a few pieces that we're working on right now. Mr. Ingwersen did a lot of his own custom framing. He's a very, very talented man, an engineer at many things. But as you look around, there's lots of artwork behind me. And here is our frames that we're working on and things that still need to be done here in the gallery. Okay, so right now we are located under the main gallery or the main granary on the property. So let's go outside and walk in Jim Ingwersen's studio and gallery. Watch your step, folks. So as you look at this property, we talked about shingles as being extremely important for the products, for what they made their money on. And this is actual 1860 shingles that are actually on this barn, and Jim wanted it preserved, wanted it kept the same. So those are shingles from the 1860s. Well, let's go. I welcome all of you to the James Ingwersen studio. So here you have it. There's a lifetime of art in front of you. We talked about the courtyard. We talked about that wagon wheel. We talked about the well being the center of the entire courtyard. We talked about different buildings, a north, south, east, and west. And Mr. Ingwersen has painted a couple of things that I want to share with you here today. So the one that you're looking at right now currently is the hay barn. And this is where the little house is right now. This entire barn burned to the ground in 1980. And the artwork that I'm about to set in front of you, and this is the cow barn, the barn that we were just in, the barn that Mr. Ingwersen had used as his studio and had used as his gallery. And now we are back using it as a gallery. So as I walk around, Mr. Ingwersen talks about a very key piece of art that helped him to be the person that he is today, and that's Gretchen. And behind me you have Gretchen. She's here. And she really was the start, as Mr. Ingwersen said, the beginning to his career. And I also have a picture of Gary. So Gretchen and Gary, as Mr. Ingwersen said, was the start to his career. People realized that he could take a flat piece of paper and make it come to life. That you can feel the emotion, you can feel the warmth. It's almost as if they're sitting here in front of you. So let's go a little further. This most lovely piece right here is Art Mickelson. Mr. Ingwersen shared with you that he did a lot of sketch classes. This is a sketch class that Mr. Ingwersen did in 3 hours. This is Art Mickelson, a classic Bailey's Harbor gentleman. And when Phyllis loved his face, Mr. Ingwersen offered him $10. Excuse me, $10 to sit in that chair. And Art said, if you're going to pay me $10, you bet I'll sit here. However, he realized it wasn't as easy as that. He sat there for 3 hours, but he said it was the hardest job he ever did, and picking rocks was actually easier. This is a monumental moment. In front of you, Jim just received 2 classic pieces of artwork. It came back from being molded. I'm in bronze. This is a nude that he had been working out in Scottsdale, Arizona. She's absolutely gorgeous. Was a model, and Mr. Ingwersen his entire life wanted her bronze, and we had the honor of unboxing her and unveiling her yesterday. Again, here's another piece that we just received back. And this is called a bust, and she's absolutely beautiful. So come on in here, and we'll go a little bit farther. I'm going to put the light on. Again, this is the original 1860s greenery, and all around you will see pictures and paintings that actually talk to you. Behind me on my right is Phyllis, Jim's wonderful, beautiful wife, his dog Hadley, his beagle, another self-portrait of Mr. Ingwersen. We're now entering into his studio. This is the studio of Jim Ingwersen. This is his studio. This is where he created all the masterpieces. This is where he would have people sit and model, and where he would make all that magic happen. In fact, here is his artist palette with some oils on, as he just finished doing a few extra little painting pieces for some people. And an extra little sneak through. I love to look at this because this is kind of fun. But this is the pastels that he uses to create. And I'm like, Mr. Ingwersen, they're all really little. And he's like, yep, I use them. They're all very special. So this is his actual pastels that he uses when he made all the pastels. And then here are all of his oils as well. So Mr. Ingwersen talked about alla prima. So as you look at each piece of artwork, other than a pastel, you'll see that, as he explained, it's just, he knew exactly how much, he knew exactly the color, and knew exactly the right place. Because you don't really get a second chance. So when you look at a piece of art, you have to look exactly at that face and say, he got every single piece right. He was known as the fastest hand in the West. He was known as the fastest hand in the West. And he could do it quickly, and he could do it fast, and he could do it accurately. The sunroom is also open. And I'll let you take a walk and enjoy it. So this is his sunroom, an area that he enjoys, an area that he works with his personal trainer, as well as an area that we also display beautiful art. Mr. Ingwersen shared with you that he was also a founder for the Door County Land Trust. So as you look out behind this beautiful view, all of Mr. Ingwersen's property, as he stated, is part of the Door County Land Trust. He has trails. It is not open to the public at this time, but he's got an absolutely gorgeous piece of property. The building that you see behind me, since it's raining, that's the exact an original smokehouse with all the tools that he used for the smokehouse in there. That's the original smokehouse. If you go a little bit further to the left, you'll see the actual original outhouse on the edge of that building. So that little bitty building on the side that you see by the end of the barn gallery, that's the original outhouse. And any equipment that you see, from the little corn roll picker to the hay rake, every single piece of tool or machinery that you see is all original from the Ingwersen homestead. So I'm going to walk you back into the gallery to grab a little bit of light. So I'm going to walk us back into the house. And on our way in, I'm going to show you a few tools that Mr. Ingwersen wanted me to share with you. And then we'll do a last few words with Mr. Ingwersen. Oh, do we want to go to the log cabin, folks? Yeah. We want to. So on our way, we're going to take a little shortcut. And we're going to stop by the little log cabin. Folks, let's go. It's not raining too bad, but we can make it. Okay, this is the little log cabin. This cabin Mr. Ingwersen purchased from a property in Liberty Grove. It was extremely important to him that he actually has a building that was built and constructed back in the 1860s as this little log cabin. So Mr. Ingwersen has reconstructed the porch. The wagon that you see in front of us was actually here, and you'll see that they saved it and sort of revived it from the fire. On the right side, you'll see how close it was to losing this piece. This is the original buggy that was on the property, and it was saved. So folks, come on in. So again, this is another little building. This was not the original on the homestead. This used to be the original hay barn. But again, Mr. Ingwersen felt it extremely important that he keep that heritage of the Pomeranian Lutheran with that courtyard to have buildings at all sides. So the people right here behind me, these are, again, sketch classes, a 3-hour sketch class. On my right is Jim's wife, Phyllis, who's absolutely gorgeous, and a self-portrait of Mr. Ingwersen himself in his earlier years. You've got Charles Peterson. Oh, don't forget Norbert Bly. Here's Norbert Bly hiding over here in the corner. We're grateful to Norbert for all of the writings and everything that he has done for this community. And that's Norbert Bly. This is one of Jim's. It's called A Fresh Start. It was one of his very first pieces. So you can see how far he's come. This was a fresh start. This was done freshman year of college. And then if you take that piece and you come in close to Phyllis Ingwersen, you can see how Mr. Ingwersen has grown as a world-renowned artist. Okay, folks, grab your umbrellas. We're going to travel back to the homestead, the main farmhouse, and visit with Mr. Ingwersen. Yes, please. Okay, folks, let's go. Mr. Ingwersen likes to value all the property.
Dry.
He values all the property. We've planted lots of trees and shrubs and plants and all kinds of really neat things on the property, from the new Japanese family, from the little blue spruce trees to about 30 other trees that are new this summer on the property. Okay, folks, let's go. Come on in. Come on in, folks. I'm going to bring you back out here, Jan. I'm going to bring you back out here. And this is exactly how Mr. Ingwersen purchased this piece of property. And the tools that you see to my right are tools that actually were from this farm. So here's the horse harnesses. So it was mainly a two-horse farm, which is really important. It meant that he had lots of horsepower back in the day when they came over from Pomerania. An actual cowbell that resembles beyond the shingles, beyond the grain, but they actually got to cows, which is huge. There's a really important tool over here, and they use this particular tool to drill those holes in the logs when they were putting logs together. So if you look at those barns, those logs go this way and then this way with the chinking in the middle in a log. And in the middle of them, they would drill a hole all the way through all those logs. And as they drilled a hole, they would put they would whittle a long stick or a long piece of wood to secure those boards. And this was the particular tool left here to show how hard these folks worked. Again, another harness here. Here's an ice pick. So back in the day, in the cow barn, you could see where they had done, now that barn burned, but they had stove wood, in an area where they actually put the ice. So they would go down to wherever they wanted. Ephraim is probably one of the most renowned places for taking ice off of the Anderson dock, but that's an actual ice pick. Here's a saw that was used. In fact, when Mr. Ingwersen, there's like 4 of these saws, and look at the blades on this saw. I'm not sure if you can see it, but I mean, talk about some hard work, and it's not a 2-man saw, this is a 1-man saw. So they worked really hard, really hard. So as I leave you right now, I've got a couple more tools that are pretty unique. I've got a regular axe that was used for kindling and for wood. And up here, I actually have a piece of equipment that was used for making those wooden shingles. That piece of equipment was used for making shingles. Again, another harness for the horses and a few horseshoes at best. So as I kind of pivot around in Mr. Ingwersen's house, if you look back up in the gable ends, you'll see that stove wood, where Pa and Ma and the kids could actually finish those corners without having all the neighbors, all the men. The men could go back to work, and the Ma and Pa and the kids could actually finish a lot of that by themselves with that stove wood. A, for heat. B, they could handle it and didn't need all the neighbors and all the men to be doing that work. So let's gather with Mr. Ingwersen, and I believe Mrs. Burke is going to bring us to a closure on this. Before I close, I want to say thank you. Thank you to the Liberty Grove Historical Society. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to share some really precious property and share this with all of you. So let's find Mr. Ingwersen. We're back, Mr. Ingwersen. We're back. And I've got Mrs. Burke here to join us.
So we're back and we're a little damp. highlights of the buildings, your paintings, your portraits, your pieces of, a couple new pieces of art.
I shared all the bronzes, Mr. Ingwersen.
Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So I want to thank you on behalf of the Liberty Grove Historical Society for allowing us to come and share your property with everyone. It's a hidden treasure here in Door County. It really is. And so Jim has gallery hours yet for one more week.
That is correct. On Wednesday from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock, please come on over, enjoy the galleries. We'll have the little house open, the little house gallery, we'll have the gallery barn, and then the big gallery will be open. Also come and enjoy the property, enjoy the buildings, walk the trails, and then enjoy this most amazing property. So Wednesday from 2 to 4, and also Saturday is our last big gallery from 11 o'clock until 5. So come on, enjoy a little heritage, enjoy the environment, enjoy the beautiful grounds that Mr. Ingwersen as a land trust originator began, and enjoy some fabulous world-renowned art. From yours truly, James Ingwersen.
Amen.
So, thank you everyone, and I just want to encourage anybody, if you have a question for Mr. Ingwersen, put it in our comments, and one of us members of the board or the marketing crew, they can take a look at what the comments and questions are, and we can get an answer from Mr. Ingwersen. But please take a visit. Wednesday or Saturday are your two last opportunities here in 2021.
Now, on behalf of Mr. Ingwersen and myself, thank you for capturing the heritage of not only the property, but also of Mr. Ingwersen and the knowledge and expertise that he brings to Liberty Grove. His knowledge and history is extremely important to all of us, and thank you all for capturing this moment and for everyone to take the time to share this with all of you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.